Hey class, we're going to talk about market economics in this lesson, and I want you to consider market economics as the free enterprise system as the economic equivalent of the uh, freedom and democratic ideals that we've been talking about in class for the past day or two. We're going to talk about 5 different ideas that make up the free market system. The key concepts being profit and loss, incentives, supply and demand, opportunity costs, and government regulation, and of course the flip side of government regulation, which is deregulation. Uh, Profit and loss simply represents the risk and reward of doing business. As we've talked about in class, um, there's no guarantee that anybody's going to succeed in business. And the purpose of every business is to make money, to make a profit. After all your expenses and costs are accounted for, whatever's left over is profit. And of course, the flip side of that is if you have a shortfall between your costs and expenses and total income, if you still have costs and expenses after you've added in all the total income, you're going to have losses in your business. Now, success is not guaranteed in business. And I want you to go visit the website that's attached to this appointment, or the assignment in Google Classroom. Click on that website and answer the couple questions I have in the Google Doc about that website. Okay, I think it'll be illuminating for you. Now, failure is a fact of life in economic matters, but failure isn't necessarily a bad thing in a free market. After all, it's part of the evolution of any economy. It's referred to in economic terms as the idea of creative destruction. Let me give you an example. At turn of the 19th into the 20th century, absent railroads, the primary means of transportation across long distances over land was horse and buggy, horseback, that kind of thing. And consider the industries that supported horseback and the not just breeding of horses, the feeding of horses, cleaning up after the horses. You also had wagon making. You had chandlers. You had wheelwrights. You had a myriad of industries that supported, and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that worked in this industry. Along comes this upstart, Henry Ford, who pioneers this idea of the horseless carriage. And of course, we're talking about the automobile industry that grows up from that. Now, what got destroyed with the advent of the automobile industry is, of course, the horse and buggy industry. What happened to the tens of thousands, those hundreds of thousands of people that were employed by the horse and buggy industry? Well, candidly, I'd like you to answer that question. What do you think happened to a lot of them? Where did they go to work? Secondly, is our world better off through that creative destruction of the horse and buggy industry with the advent of the automobile industry? Okay, again, this is going to be one of the questions you're going to need to address in the Google Doc. Now, turning your attention to incentives. Incentives are something that motivate a person to act in a particular way. It doesn't have to be financial. It doesn't have to be economic. The discussion is not limited to this subject matter alone. Incentives are what make anybody do anything. Okay, think of an example as a thought experiment. Think of an example of a non-financial incentive in a non-economic setting. We'll talk about it in class tomorrow. I'm interested in hearing your examples. The most common financial incentive is, of course, money. It's not the only one, but certainly it's the primary. And to identify incentives, the things that make people do something or to act in a particular way, think about what drives someone to succeed. Whether that's a positive or negative thing, you're probably talking about their incentive. his or her incentive that makes them act in a particular way. Maybe they're driven to make a better life for their family. Maybe somebody's driven to make the most amount of money possible. Maybe they're driven to be the best athlete or the best whatever we're talking about. Okay. Incentives. What makes people do things? It's a very powerful force in economics. Supply and demand. It's an idea that I'm sure you're familiar with, and even if you haven't formally studied it, you're intuitively aware of what supply and demand are and how they interact. Supply reflects the amount of a product available to be purchased at a particular price, while demand reflects the desire for a product at a particular price. So you've got both sides of the equation here. You've got consumers on the demand side and sellers on the supply side. When you find the intersection of supply and demand to be maximized, that's called equilibrium. Okay, and as you can see on the chart that accompanies this slide, when you find a point of equilibrium, you're delivering the maximum amount of goods at the highest price that the market will bear, and that's from the seller's perspective. From the consumer's perspective, you're getting enough goods that everybody who wants the product receives the product at the lowest price that the product can be made available. Now, when this happens, everybody's happy. Now, of course, it's also a hypothetical concept. It's theoretical. It very rarely happens for reasons we'll talk about in class tomorrow, but I want you to think about, why is the consumer happy in that setting? Okay, and consider if the price was higher, not everybody could necessarily afford the product at that higher price. And if there's not enough of the product available, then somebody's going to go without. Okay, and again, flip it around for the seller. Why is the seller happy at equilibrium? Hey, if they are maximizing the amount of money they can make without having to store any product, so they don't have any costs of storage, they're selling all of the product, 100% of the product, at the most amount of money it's available, they're maximizing their profit. Okay. And again, if you have questions about this, we can go over it in class again. But again, supply and demand, one of the basic fundamental principles of the free market system. As is opportunity costs. This is really a decision-making tool. Opportunity cost is the relative value of activities discussed in terms of the activity not chosen. If you have door A and door B, and you have to choose between these two doors, if you choose to open door B, then the opportunity cost is door A. Likewise, if you choose door A, the opportunity cost is door B. Thus, the cost is the lost opportunity that results from making your decision. Okay, now, a lot of students confuse this idea and think about, well, what about the value, the costs associated with something? Remember that the opportunity cost is discussed in terms of the relative value, not the actual value of something, but the relative value. These two things in relation to each other, not absolute values in dollars and cents. So, for example, you need to choose between watching two TV shows, and you don't have the chance to record the one that you don't watch. Okay, so you're going to watch the Bears game or you're going to watch the Cubs game, and you can't record one or the other. Well, the opportunity cost of watching the Bears game is watching the Cubs game. And vice versa, watching the Cubs game, the opportunity cost is watching the Bears game. If you're a Sox fan, you're just out of luck. The second example, college versus getting a job. A lot of students jump in and say, okay, yeah, but look, college can cost X tens of thousands of dollars a year, whereas I'm making money when I'm working my job. That's not what opportunity cost is about. Just keep it at this high level of thinking. College versus getting a job. If you go to college, the opportunity cost is getting a job. If you get a job, the opportunity cost is going to college. How you make that decision, the variables that you assign to these, the values that you assign to this, is really up to you. We're talking about the relative value between these two ideas. Going to Disneyland versus remodeling a bathroom, again, the opportunity cost is that opportunity that is foregone. Finally, government regulation. What are some good reasons to regulate an economy? I can think of 4 good ones. They're listed here, and these are pretty conventional justifications for regulation. I'm sure you can come up with more, and we'll talk about those in class, and you'll end up writing about them a little bit too. So, first reason to regulate. It sounds kind of crazy, but how about the avoidance of moral hazard? There are certain things in a free market, in an absolutely pure free market with no regulation whatsoever, no government regulation, what would stop people from selling their vote? Well, the answer is nothing. Even though that's a morally repugnant thing to do, there's nothing that would stop them from selling their vote. How about parents selling their children? What would stop a parent from selling their child without those government regulations? Of course, this is hypothetical. These are horrific ideas on purpose. I'm bringing these horrific ideas up on purpose to make the point. There is regulation of the economy precisely to stop some immoral decision making, okay, some immoral act. A second reason, promotion of efficiency and competition. Thus, we have antitrust laws. We want to stop trusts or monopolies from forming to preserve competition, to keep prices relatively low due to the competition between companies. The government insures banks through the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Guarantee, in order to not only maintain the flow of money, but to protect consumers from economic downturn. A third reason, the protection of property rights, both before and after the fact. Property rights are a really important fundamental idea in America. Look, there's a lot of regulations that stop bad things from happening to somebody's property, not just real estate, but their personal property before the fact. Okay, regulations that stop something that could otherwise have occurred is regulation before the fact. After the fact, there's an entire dispute resolution process we call the court systems, where people can sue to recoup the loss that they suffered as a result of somebody's bad action. Another reason, the protection of the health, safety, and environment. We all want clean air, we want clean water. So these regulations, government sets standards that companies have to meet. We want a safe workplace. We want food inspection, all of this kind of stuff. Now, let me ask you this, and you're going to write about this in your Google Doc. Should government prevent some businesses from failing? Is that an appropriate form of government regulation? We'll talk about it tomorrow. I'm interested in what you guys think. 2009, the government gave tens of billions of dollars to General Motors to preserve that company from failing. Now, deregulation is the flip side. A lot of people argue, hey, look, regulations cost business and consumers billions, hundreds of billions of dollars and increase prices. The argument goes that deregulation can also benefit the economy. It allows a smaller government to focus on the core mission of a government, which of course is governance. I'm looking forward to talking to you guys tomorrow about this.